Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. This is House Committee on General and Housing, and it is still January 29th, 2025. The committee is reconvened and we're going to hear from the American Federation of Teachers for an introduction. And then at 10:30, we're going to hear H57, which is on our wall. It's going to be introduced to us. It's an act relating to survivor benefits for law enforcement officers. And then we'll take a break. So why doesn't the committee, we have now in front of us Heather Reimer, who's executive director of the American Federation for Teachers, Vermont. Perhaps we should introduce ourselves.
Good morning, Ashley Bartley. I serve Franklin 1, which is Fairfax and the majority of Durham.
Joe Parsons, Barry Thompson in Groff. I'm Charlton Athens, Chester Grafton and Wyndham.
Gail Pezzo, Chittenden 20, Colchester.
Mary Howard, Rutland City, District 6.
Sonia Lamont from the Washington District.
Hello, Emily Krasnow, South Burlington, Chittenden 9.
Hi, I'm Mark Holly, Callis, Plainfield, and Marshfield. The two members did not visit ill, so stay healthy. Seems to be going on and drive carefully. Heather, you want to introduce yourself and take it away?
My name is Heather Reimer. I'm executive director of AFT Vermont. I've been in the labor movement for about 3 decades, most of that in Vermont. And yeah, so our union is AFT Vermont. One of the things people sometimes said, I always want to make sure you distinguish us from the NEA. Our siblings in the NEA are great, but they represent K through 12 in Vermont and we represent 0. We represent no bus drivers, no teachers in K through 12. So all of our members are in either higher education, mostly public higher education, or in healthcare. And so a majority of our members actually are covered under the NLRB, not the VLRB, but we have a substantial number of members covered by the Vermont Labor Relations Board, notably the faculty and most of the staff at UVM and the faculty and most of the staff at the Vermont State University System and faculty at CCV. So we are the second largest union. We have members who have been in AFT or the locals have been AFT for 50 years. And we have a lot of new members. We've doubled our membership in the last 6-7 years. And in fact, we have a representation election scheduled for the RNs at Northwestern Medical Center in St. Albans coming up next week. And we are working to get an election scheduled for the support staff and techs at Bennington Memorial Hospital. Both those will be covered under the NLRB. So we, as you can see, we've got 10,000 members, lots of new folks. We're in every corner of the state. And we want to continue to organize. So one of the things that's, interesting, I don't know if it's interesting. Most people in this country want to be organized into a union, right? Your bargaining power as a single individual is very low. All of the studies say that union workers make more money and they have representation if things are unfair at work. So one of the questions we always ask is, why is it that most workers are not in the union? And the primary reason is that when employers oppose the union and use a variety of tactics, both legal and illegal, it is almost impossible for the union to win. And we have lost elections. In the public sector, employers tend not to fight organization so hard. That's why we generally see a lot higher union density in the public sector. In fact, I think in Vermont, there's very few unorganized public sector workers, and they're mostly in small groups. Could be wrong about that. Someone can tell me I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But when you look at the private sector, employers, up until recently, it was legal for employers to hold what they call captive audience meetings, like one of the most effective ways to kill a union drive. And in these meetings, often they're one-on-one, employer calls someone into their office, and this is a true story. Said, hey, you know how sometimes there's a snow day and we let you go pick up your kid? Well, if the union comes in, I can't let you do that anymore, right? Because the union is going to make it even and the same for everybody in a negative way. Also, in a lot of elections, there will be a termination, not always of a union supporter. Sometimes they'll terminate a boss that people don't like. But that still creates fear, and it makes people worried about what the union's going to mean. Maybe, then maybe the boss they do like is going to get fired. And they'll also make promises to people. They can say things like, oh, you're very young and bright, and I think you'd be a great charge nurse. But you know what? If the union comes in, that old bigoted person, right? I'm going to have to and they're terrible. Nobody likes them. The union's going to force me to make them be your super, to be the lead charge nurse. Anyway, so those are some of the tactics that they use, under the last, and I know you all only deal with the VLRB, but I like to paint a picture a little bit for sort of what we are up against when we organize. And I will just say, the current administration at the federal level has just unconstitutionally removed one of the members of the National Labor Relations Board, which means they functionally cannot do any work. They can't protect any workers' rights. We're concerned about that, as you might be aware. But yeah, that's sort of the realm in which we organize folks. But let me focus a little bit more on what you all in this body have, which is the Vermont Labor Relations Board. So much of the Vermont Labor Relations Board follows the NLRB, but there are different rules and different pieces there. I forgot one other little piece. Just for our larger union, is mostly teachers, but AFT nationally represents 1.7 million folks and is the second largest healthcare union. So AFT nationally does represent a lot of the K through 12 teachers, but also, again, second largest healthcare union. So we are part of that organization.
How many did you say?
I think 1.6 million. I can't remember what AFT is nationally. In some states, AFT and NEA have merged. Those are primarily states where I think in Minnesota, where AFT had represented the urban areas and NEA had represented the rural areas. We've worked with in past legislative sessions. We've worked with folks who sat in this committee room or when it was upstairs and with the body to make some improvements that we think to the Vermont Labor Relations Board. And we've got a list of things that we are introducing legislation or working with legislators on this session. One is the right to strike. The International Labor Organization says it's a fundamental right for workers to collectively withdraw their power. Currently, we represent, again, the faculty and much of the staff at Vermont State University and UVM. Currently, it is illegal for them to strike. And we think that's a problem. Obviously, teachers, municipal workers can strike. We think that they should be in the same category as those folks and have that right. Now, do we think everybody should be out there striking all the time? Our role is to help get folks get a good contract, but a strike is a tool that, again, if a majority of folks want to take, we think that's their right to do so. And I will just say, as a little side note, with the NLRB being functionally like non-existent, I would expect there will be more strikes because workers will not have a legal way to enforce their right, to their rights under the current law. But that's it's kind of a side note. So unemployment compensation for part-time faculty, we represent a lot of part-time faculty. And right now, and this is I think this is a small fix. Right now, whenever they, let's say they teach, they've been teaching 2 classes every semester. Now they don't need them to teach those 2 courses. We encourage them to go down and apply for unemployment. unemployment always denies their application, they appeal, and then they win almost always. And so there's just a way to change that around, so it's not an automatic denial. Reform the Vermont Labor Relations Board. So right now, the VLRB takes on several functions. One, and again, their domain is solely the public sector, municipal, K through 12, the public colleges and universities, the state of Vermont. And they do representation processes. Used to be an election, now there's a card check. Again, I don't think there's been a lot of those recently because I think most of the public sector workers, again, not all, but have been organized. They adjudicate unfair labor practice charges. And for the most part, they also handle grievances. And Vermont is either the only or one of the only states that deals with grievance arbitration. So most union contracts have a process. Let's say someone gets terminated. Now, someone gets fairly terminated, they got fairly terminated. The union, can't bring back everybody's job. But sometimes the employers unfairly terminate someone for a variety of reasons. So usually what happens is there's an internal process to the union. So the union files a grievance, the union management sit down, see, 1, 2, or 3 steps. They sit down if they can come to a resolution. If they cannot, most contracts have a process says at the end of it that a neutral arbiter, someone else besides them decides the case. And so under the VLRB, and again, it is different from municipal and K through 12 workers, the VLRB decides those cases for state employees and for employees of UVM and Vermont State University. And that has led to a backlog. One of our concerns is sometimes it takes more than a year to hear a case, more than a year to hear an unfair labor practice charge. If you've been unfairly terminated, it is not, you might win your job back 18 months later, 2 years later and win back pay, but you are going through a lot of stress during that time. And so K through 12 and municipal employees have a private and our members who are under the NLRB, that 4th step or the last step is usually a private arbitrator. And so they, the American Arbitration Association, private arbitrators are just faster. You get a decision much quicker than you do under the VLRB. And it's also a streamlined process. Under the VLRB, there's a whole discovery phase, which can be, a pretty tremendous expense to the unions for having lawyers available. So this body in the past has given folks the ability to use private arbitration, but you have to get the employer to agree. And what we found is the employer doesn't want to agree to that because they would rather, frankly, have a long, drawn-out process, is our experience. And so we'd like to see that could be one of the ways. Anyway, I hope that you all will maybe bring in the executive director of the VLRB and ask what their opinion is too. But I think this one, moving arbitrations, the default to a private arbitrator rather than to the board might be a way to resolve backlogs.
You're just about out of time.
Oh, okay, I'll be quick. All right, sorry. So the last thing I'll just say is we, in other states, part-time faculty get to be in the union on day 1. Doesn't mean they don't have a probationary period, but not in this state. And so folks it's very confusing, I think, to the employer. It's confusing to us. People have to teach 1 or 2 or 3 semesters. So apologies, I didn't leave time for questions, but I'll be around.
Well, thank you very much for the quick introduction.
Sure, okay.
It's really helpful.
All
Thank you
right,
so
great.
much, and we'll
Yeah,
probably see you again. So now we're going to have introduced H57, which is an act relating to survivor benefits for law enforcement officers, something this committee has dealt with last year. And Representative Mark Higley is the lead sponsor and
I'm good.
you're good, okay.
I'll just back up
I'm
what
just
Mark
gonna
has to
say for the record that Representative Krasno in this committee is also a sponsor. And our legislative counsel, Sophie Zapney, is going to help Mark as well to present the bill. You want to come sit down?
Get there and I'll just sit here. Can I see her? Just
Yes, that's Debbie Dolgen's speech, and Debbie is out ill, as is Elizabeth Burrows. Mark, should perhaps, you know, everyone.
you're not, so
Why don't we
good.
introduce
Appreciate it.
Eddie to you?
I'll start. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Emily Krasnow, South Burlington, Chittenden 9.
Hi, Sadia Lamont, Royal Washington, neighbor.
Mary Howard, Rutland City, District 6. Gail Pezzo, Chittenden 20, Colchester.
Tom Charlton, Athens, Grafton, Chester.
Wow.
Joe Parsons, represent the beautiful towns of Newbury, Thompson, and Groton.
Leonora Dodge, I represent the Essex Town and City of Essex Junction districts.
Ready?
Ashley Bartley, Fairfax, Georgia.
And I'm Mark Mahali, and I represent Callis, Plainfield, and Marshfield. Welcome, Representative. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. First thing that I'd like to say, and I have apologized, but I'd like to apologize again, that Representative Howard expressly committed herself to be a sponsor as well. And I failed to get her name on the list. So I just want to put that out there right off the bat. She was instrumental last year as well.
You are now on the record.
It's a challenge, as you can imagine, with a number of bills and keeping everything straight. Maybe just a little bit of history would help. Back in 2017, those of you who knew Representative Mike Yantaska from Charlotte introduced this bill. It didn't go anywhere back then. Again, I introduced it last year. You folks in this committee that were on it will remember that it was passed out of committee. It got lost somewhere. I don't know the whole story about that. It did appear at the very end of the session. We included it in a GovOps bill that I was on GovOps at the time. It went to the Senate and never came back in that bill. So that's a little bit of the history. And again, some more of the history is in 2021, initially it was to cover firefighters. And then in 2025, it was amended to benefit emergency personnel, EMTs. And now we're looking to include law enforcement. I was asked after the tragic death of the Rutland police officer, Jessica Ebbinghausen, to present it again. And of course, you know, we almost had another tragedy just a little while ago with Officer Gray over in St. Johnsbury. So as you can see, it's an opportunity that I hate to say it, that more of these folks may be in jeopardy of losing their life in the line of duty. A few of the people that I've reached out to again is the treasurer's office. They were very supportive last time. They are supportive again. They have told me that there is no money in that account presently. Last year, you may remember there was $160,000. The amount was raised under the Budget Adjustment Act from $50,000 to an $80,000.
Potential award.
Correct. My understanding is looking at, I believe, 2 individuals that have passed in the past year, that money will be used up or potentially completely gone. I've asked the treasurer to give me some ideas to where some seed money for that can come from again. We've talked about reaching out to the emergency board in the sense if something like that, well, they're going to have to anyway, again, because there's no money in that account. But again, I'm hoping that, and he's willing to start a conversation. And anyway, they're going to be reaching out to me in that regard. I've also reached out to Mark Anderson and the Vermont Sheriff's Department Association is again on board. I reached out again to Chris Hoare He is currently the Vermont State Representative for the New England Police Benevolent Association and also President of the Vermont Police Association. He's been very instrumental in feeding me facts, maybe someone that you folks who want to hear from again. Some of the information that he sent me already is some of the surrounding states like Maine has $100,000 adjusted annual by a COLA. Massachusetts has 300,000 non-taxable. New Hampshire has 100,000. Rhode Island has a 40% of federal death benefit equal to 179,500. Connecticut has 100,000. So this gives you just an idea as to those extra benefits that some of these other states have for law enforcement. I guess I'll end it there. That's kind of a brief introduction. Again, going forward, I hope we can build up support again for this and have it get across the finish line this year. Appreciate it.
Do any members of the committee have questions of Representative Hood? Please.
Not a question, but I really appreciate your tenacity in bringing this important bill back. And I really hope that we can swiftly work to get it across the finish line in here at least. And it will go the distance this time because when I have talked about it out in my community and other places, people are very supportive and understanding that this is something that's important. So thank you again for coming back.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Joe,
Thanks. Do you know where the money that is in the account or was in the account, where that had come from? Is that
I don't really know that. That would be a question for the treasurer for sure, but not sure where that came from. It's been in there for a while. I think the last person to receive it was a while ago, 2006, I believe the treasurer told me. So that's been quite a while.
And we should definitely, if we do decide, we should have Ashlyn come back in because she had all that information about when and how often it had been used in the history. It was quite interesting.
yeah, well, I think when we hear it, if we hear this, we'll definitely do that and explore, I guess, the question of whether we should have a provision that allows the e-board to make transfers as necessary. So that it's not just the naked bill, but that there's adequate funding for it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Higley, for bringing this bill back. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, how much the people in Rutland City, Rutland County appreciate it. This is a bill, I mean, we really don't want to use the funding. We really don't want to. We want our EMTs, our firefighters, our police officers to be safe. Someone once said to me that, athletes go in and play a game and they win millions of dollars. Firefighters, police officers, EMTs are going into places where people are trying to get out of. So this bill is very personal for me. I knew Jessica's grandfather, worked with him, and I truly hope that we can quickly get this through this time. And I would be so appreciative. And once again, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just
Please.
interject a little bit on top of that. Again, I think it's important to understand, whether it's EMTs, firefighters, or law enforcement, they do put their lives on the line every day. As you can see from some of the more recent reports, you just never know when, whether it's a random traffic stop, whether it's a house call for domestic, whatever it might be, your opportunity is close to some catastrophe. So appreciate that.
Well, now let's hear from our alleged counsel about Bill.
Just wanted to check that everyone had a copy in front of them. No,
We don't.
you have one? So while it's getting handed out, so section 1, the act will be known as Jessica's Law, and I think as everyone just heard, after Jessica Ebbinghausen, a Rutland City police officer who was killed on July 7th, 2023 in the line of duty. Section 2 starts to go through the benefits here, and essentially what it's doing is taking the existing law that covers emergency personnel, so it covers firefighters and EMTs, and adding in law enforcement officers. And so what the law would do, what this bill would do if passed, would be to provide that one-time $80,000 survivor benefit to members of the family of law enforcement officers.
Sorry, so can I just ask you a quick question that I should know the answer to, and I'm just absolutely blanking? Volunteer firefighters, are they covered under this?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. So emergency personnel in the current statute is defined as firefighters, emergency medical personnel, and volunteer personnel, and then they have other statutory definitions attached to that. So again, the Bill H57 would make amendments throughout the chapter to enable family members of law enforcement officers to receive that same $80,000 payment from the state. So the amendments include the definition of a law enforcement officer, updates the definition of the line of duty, and that also includes updates to the line of duty for emergency personnel. So it covers service in answer to a call of the department or service for a fire or emergency, and it includes going to and returning from a fire or emergency or participating in a fire or emergency training drill. So that's an expanded definition. And with respect to law enforcement officers, it would cover anyone that died in the line of duty as service as a law enforcement officer in answer to a complaint lodged with the department or in response to a disorder, including going to, returning from, and investigating or responding to the complaint or disorder, or service under orders from the department or in any emergency for which the law enforcement officer serves as a law enforcement officer. So the goal is to make it broad. And again, the changes to survivor is just to include law enforcement officer. As a result, there are also proposed changes to the current Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Review Board to add law enforcement officers into the name of the board, and then to also include representation on the board. So it would add the executive director of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council or designee to the board, as well as a member of the public to represent the interests of law enforcement officers. The member of the public would be appointed by the governor, which is currently the situation for the representative, the member of the public that represents emergency workers, firefighters. Just looking to see if there's really any other. The other changes are largely just adding law enforcement officer. There's some cleanup language, just consistent with our drafting manual as we try to get rid of his or her. So some of them are more technical. And then the benefit fund, again, that would, the board is the one that hears, the situation and makes a determination on whether or not to award the benefit. And as you've already heard, there is some question around whether there are funds available right now. This bill does not include any language regarding appropriating funds for the award.
I have a question for you. How does, it would be the current law, because it's EMS is already covered, correct? How does the current law, our town of Newbury contracts with New Hampshire?
Wah, wah.
You thought you'd never get.
I do not know what the answer to that would be. I mean, I would think if they were responding to a Vermont call, but again, there may be a memorandum of understanding, or there's some contractual language. I don't know how that works, but I would go to that to see what it provides. But yeah, I mean, we have borders with, I anticipate a lot of cross-border cooperation for things.
Other questions for Ledge Council?
This question, I have no clear idea how to address this. This specifies that it is service and answer to a call of the department. Most of our first responders, if they are just in the wrong place at the right time, there's a crisis, particularly natural disasters, mass casualties, things like that, they're going to step in, whether they're on call or not.
So this covers for law enforcement officers, it covers in answer to a complaint or a disorder, but it also covers under service under orders from the department, just in general. So I think they would be covered.
So
by the
if
language
they're
that's
acting
in
on
there.
behalf of the department, but they've got.
Right, whether there's an actual call or whether, yeah.
Okay.
That was a question I had. I mean, I was kind of curious that we just didn't say in the line of their duty. Let's say, but sometimes, unfortunately, a police officer is simply shot. You know, they're driving, or recently had a situation where someone was wielding a knife in a police department with somebody who was off duty. They were just there in the entryway. You think that would be covered by service under orders?
So I would think if they're in their place of employment, that would.
They were not, they were off duty.
But they would.
They were in their place.
They would, but for, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why the line of duty has been expanded also for emergency personnel to cover going to, returning from. I think so it's not just in the moment, but that if you were struck and killed on the way home from, being at an event. But if there's clarifying language that the committee would be interested in, that's certainly
You can
something.
deal with that, yeah. Please, Nora.
I'm just trying to do just overall, whether we know a little bit of the history of how the state got involved in, did this start out being a sort of ceremonious way of saying we recognize the importance of these positions? Or was it truly like, we need to help somebody in their time of need because there isn't money anywhere else? Or can somebody help to clarify that for me? Because $80,000 honestly is not that much. So it almost seems like, is this a symbolic show of support? And, I'm looking at national labor, occupancy fatalities by occupation. And this is in no way to undermine this bill, but when you just look at occupational fatalities, law enforcement isn't in the top of occupational fatalities. And so I'm just trying to understand the background of how we came to do this, and so that I understand better, how it's important. I back this, but I'm just trying to understand, what are we trying to accomplish?
Representative Higley, perhaps that question is best responded to by yourself.
I do, there is a federal benefit that's adjusted yearly. It's through the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program. Currently, it looks to be $448,575 for eligible deaths and disabilities occurring on or after October 1st, 2024.
$448,000. Okay.
Yeah, so again, this is a supplemental as Chris Hoare had mentioned in his reporting. The states have just added a contribution on the state's end to show their appreciation as well. So that's a little bit more, and you'll find out, I'm sure, with further testimony in regards to how that program actually works as well.
I would also speculate just as well, and then I'll get to you, Gail. This is my own thinking. There's no question that many jobs across the United States are perilous. Utility work. I mean,
Yeah, no,
there's
that's what I'm
many
looking at,
jobs that are perilous. And either through union contracts or law, there has been in the United States, perhaps not adequate, an attempt to make sure that if those people are injured, their injury is dealt with financially, and if they die, their family receives financial benefits. I think what's going on here is that there is a sense that with people who do law enforcement or emergencies, there's something else going on. There is a recognition that these people, that intrinsic to their work is a personal risk that is of a different nature. And that very often, and I think it's emotional on the part of society. I think when a law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty, for reasons which are, I mean, a death is a death, the family suffers no matter what. But I think when it's a law enforcement person and they're literally killed by the deliberate act of somebody else as opposed to an accident, it creates a desire to do something special. And that's where it comes from. So I think it's partly not just injury on the job or death on the job. It's the deliberate nature by which these people die that is very difficult. I know from my own experience of riding around with a police officer, you know, I gotta say, what they're walking into.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can elaborate too, you mentioned, on the job, what that actually means. Ashland from the treasurer's office did talk to me about the two individuals that they're looking at. There's a board that looks at that. And I believe what she said, and again, you'll hear from her, hopefully, is one of the firefighters died of a heart attack after a fire. He wasn't on the job, so to speak. But again, he had just gotten done. So you're not gonna deny somebody that right or that, benefit just because they weren't actually.
They didn't get the heart attack an hour earlier, right?
Right. So again, that's just an example, and Ashland will certainly explain that and how that board works as well.
Gail, did you have a question?
So I need a little bit more clarity about on the job, especially with a police officer, because if they're not in their place of employment and they're not also on the clock, they very often will participate in things off the clock that put them in jeopardy.
So this does also cover volunteer.
So that would be classified as volunteer if they were in we have 7-Elevens and come up in a 7-Eleven and something happened, but they're not on duty and they got involved. That would cover that.
Well, it covers, the current statute covers emergency personnel that includes volunteer personnel as defined by 24 VSA 2651. I would want to double check that to see. But I did just want to follow up on what was just
Or it
said.
does say, or in any emergency for which the law enforcement officer serves as a law enforcement officer.
Okay.
I think that would cover that, the 7-Eleven situation, not to pick on 7-Eleven.
The other piece was that there is a definition that currently is in the statute on occupation-related illness, which is a disease that directly arises out of and in the course of service, including a heart injury or disease symptomatic within 72 hours from the date of last service in the line of duty, which shall be presumed to be incurred in the line of duty, which I think goes to what you were just saying about the firefighter. So that's currently in the statute.
Does that include like mental health?
If someone were to commit suicide or something. Right.
That would have 72 hours there.
I would
There's a
think so.
disease
Yeah.
that directly arises out of.
It would,
I mean,
but it does depend. There are clearly going to be situations which are difficult, and that's the function of that, of the board.
Yeah.
So no matter how careful we are with our definition. Any other questions of either Representative Higley or our alleged counsel?
I guess my
Go ahead.
My
please,
only other
Leonore.
question, just to, because do we have any sense of what, what, you know, have sort of victims groups or anything have spoken, in terms of our, you know, budgeting? I feel like our community wants to back this. And I'm just trying to figure out like how feasible it is. Do we know that the numbers are there to be able to support what we're putting into effect? Like, because I don't see
Well,
an appropriation, right?
if I may,
Yeah,
I don't want to speak for Mark, but that will, when we will, if we
we have to get a
a
JFO.
lot of testimony. We'll hear from advocates, organization. We went through this last year and to discuss the appropriations with the folks that are in that jurisdiction,
We're-
yeah.
Awesome.
I would say,
As you can tell, I'm
If we
coming
take-
into this
Of course,
totally
no,
fresh,
yeah.
totally new. So I'm just asking all of the questions
All of
because,
that will unfold.
yeah.
please
Thank you.
don't apologize for asking questions ever in this committee. I think that if and when, I can't speak for the whole committee, so I'll say if and when this comes off the wall and is is the subject of testimony, we will be inquiring into all of those issues, including the funding issue. Any other thoughts, comments? Just
Mr. Chair,
Representative.
again, the last communication I had with the treasurer was that we are certainly interested in supporting this. And that he's asked Ashland to, she's currently working on the fund.
Ashland.
Ashland.
Okay, yeah, right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Representative Higley, thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Well, thank you folks. You're
And
very accommodating.
came in and appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sophie, thank you for your work on this.
We don't yet have this bill listed under the bills tab of our committee page. FYI, 857.
857.
We go from 50 to 63.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we don't have
You're really
57
wall there.
or 60.
It's on the wall.
Or 106.
It's on the wall,
I
but
just
but
refreshed.
we'll pay attention
So
to it.
where do you look? If you look at, I'm looking under bills.
Thank
So
you.
Bills
that go up.
in. Thank you, Sophie.
Roll bills in. Oh, sorry, that's not a super.
That's the ones we've worked on.
It's, all right,
Just
before we go
sounded-
offline, just in terms of where we are today, thank you, everybody, for your participation, and I'm very sorry that two of our members are sufficiently ill that they can't be here.
Ugh.
We're going to have lunch break. Well, we're free until 1:30. At 1:30, I guess I'm going to ask our committee assistant, do we know if Angela Zakowski is confirmed? She is,
She usually zooms in.
and she'll be zooming. So we will have testimony from Angela Zakowski, who is director of the Vermont Landlord Association. And that's for half an hour. And then we will hear from Big Hartman. They are executive director and general counsel of the Human Rights Commission, as an introduction to the Human Rights Commission. It's not just about H38. It's about the Human Rights Commission, what they do, what their purpose is, and what they pitch. So that's our day. And so we will